I hope this thing works. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. So, we are starting the procurement marathon now. It's going to be a long session, and let's take it quite casual. Drop your questions in the chat, and I will try to answer them as we go. It's going to be a long session, so what we will do is we'll take short breaks, and I will put the timers on the screen if I have to eat my lunch or go for a coffee, and then you can all can come back. So diving right into the content, these are the topics that I plan to cover today. These are the long list, and I hope we can stay long enough to go through that. And I don't think so you guys can hear the music, so let me just get some music behind it. Okay, excellent. So what I'm gonna do is real quick, if it is too loud, let me know. I'm gonna decrease the sound of the music. All right. What I'm gonna do quickly is I'm just going to share this link on my LinkedIn so that people can join in, and then we will start. Thank you so much, guys. Give me one more second. Live for the procurement marathon. Join in. Awesome. So let's start. I'm going to walk you through with what exactly happens in procurement from start till the end, and then we will take one section at a time, and then we will probably try to draw something, discuss it in detail, and as we see, we can go. All right. So the first step is I'm going to talk about procurement process, start to the end. Then I'm going to tell you something about the demand planning, which is supply chain related topic, but kind of ties up to the procurement. After that, we will go through with the procurement basics. I will tell you what exactly a purchase requisition is. Some basics around how organization works in terms of budget approvals, etc., etc. What is scope, specifications, and so on and so forth. The fourth section is where we will go into the sourcing aspects of how you can issue your requirements, how to speak to the vendors, what are the trade terms that generally all the buyers will use. And that's the longest section I'm going to cover. The fifth section here, let me bold it, I guess. These are the different sections. So, all right. So as I said, the first section is going to be the procurement process overview. The second section is the demand planning overview. The third section is purchase requisition basics. The fourth section is going to be the sourcing process basics. The fifth section is going to be the basics of delivery follow-up. Basically, when you send out the PO or issue the PO, then how to actually make sure the follow-up is happening. Thanks, Debs. Lovely to see your comment after so long. Then we move towards the basics of invoice and payment processes, warehousing, inventory planning and management. We are also going to talk about how shipment happens in case you have to reject the shipment and you have to do the re-export. How scrap management can happen when you have to sell the stuff outside of your company's vendor base. What are the typical things that you will have to take care of? Then this is basically some of the new things I will try to cover. A lot of time people are now started talking about procurement excellence. So what exactly we mean by procurement excellence? What is digital procurement? What is e-sourcing? So on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I will club this into the one section here, which is what is procurement excellence. All right. So now the curriculum is set. We have about 11 sections to cover. Let's go with the first one, which is the overall overview of procurement process. What I will do is I'm gonna open up the PowerPoint here and then probably try to draw something. And I'll breeze through with this one because everybody should be aware about what basic procurement process looks like. So in every organization, there are two things that needs to be taken care of. All right. So one second. So we are talking about procurement process. Procurement process. There are two kind of buyers that I know. One who will do, let's say, an approach A, which we will talk about. And these buyers are very, very data driven, meticulous in their approach. And then there are type of buyer B who are usually easy, who will probably do, I have to just get the requirement from the users, shoot it out to the vendors, get the lowest price and issue the PO. My focus right now is to enable you to become a data-driven buyer, which is the buyer A. All right. So in general, what the procurement overview of the process will involve some sort of requirement data gathering, right? The purchaser needs to know the requirements, all right? And then this requirement could be of different types, and we will cover that, right? Rather, I can just type it. That should be much more clearer. Let's go here. All right. So overview. So in the overview, what basically we are saying is the first step will always be requirement gathering, right? And basically you have to understand what kind of procurement you are going to do because that can change the steps you have to follow. So what are the different types of procurement available? The first type which is there is, let's say, capex. The second is the OPEX. This is basically the CAPEX OPEX classification. Under this, you can have, under the CAPEX, you can have equipment purchases, which is heavy machinery purchases. You can have IT hardware as a category or IT software as a category, right? You also can have raw material sort of commodities. And I will tell you that there's a huge difference in the way you buy equipments, IT hardware, software, and the way you're supposed to buy raw material requirements, etc., etc. And then after this is the, how should I say, commoditized stuff, which is basically nothing, let's say admin or office, what we also call as indirects, right? So in every organization you will have these, how should I say, types of sourcing requirements in different way of form. Now what happens is, for example, in the requirement gathering phase, if you are supposed to buy equipment, right, it's usually input from the project planning team, meaning they will lay down a 3-year factory expansion sort of a plan, how many production capacities they need to enhance, and to reach that production capacity, what are the equipments that are needed. It's usually a long-term plan, and from a project planning team perspective, you can know the equipments. Similarly, the project planning team can also give you IT hardware and IT software. Let's say we are working in a factory which is manufacturing some chemicals or any other product. There will be a raw material requirement also that can keep the factory running. So this usually comes from the inventory planning team, and we will go in depth of it. And this is admin is basically small pockets of standardized commoditized product, off the shelf product. This could be your stationery, this could be your usual admin requirement stuff. There's one thing which I missed here is services, right? And civil and installation and commissioning. And you can also have consulting services. These are your management consultants or business consultants, IT consultants, etc., etc., etc. So all in all, I hope I haven't missed something. These are the different types of sourcing that can happen. And depending upon what kind of buyer you are, you would probably have to identify who's going to give you the requirement and who's going to consume the material that you are going to deliver, or who's your end user. Okay. So we move from the requirement gathering phase into something what we call as strategy phase. And if you're a good buyer, what you will do is, depending upon your requirement gathering, you will try to build an annual view, which are the typical months where you are expected to issue the PO. So this is annual view of requirements. And after this, in the strategy phase, you will also analyze how many vendors do you have, what kind of vendors they are, who are your strategic vendors. Basically, strategic means either they are your top 80% supplier from the spend perspective, or you are more dependent upon them because of the exclusivity or because of the pricing, some locking arrangement. So these could be your strategic vendors. The third input here is the market conditions. In the market conditions, hold on. When I say market conditions, I basically mean you need to identify, for example, if I'm buying raw material here, imagine I'm a raw material supplier. I know how many metric tons am I consuming on daily basis, and then that can give me a view in terms of, let's say, my monthly requirement, my quarterly requirement, my annual requirement. I would also know, for example, how many strategic vendors I have for this particular raw material. And now when I say market conditions, is basically the information on the price drivers. So sticking with the example of the raw material, I'm going to take, if I'm buying natural rubber, for example, which is a commodity or a raw material used in tire manufacturing, I would lean on what is my exchange rate movement because of the conversion of USD to Indian rupees. What is the natural rubber price in the market, right? And I'm using this as an example only. So what's the price? What else natural rubber is dependent upon is basically the demand and supply of the raw material required to manufacture natural rubber. Demand supply cycle. Are there any economic events? When I say macroeconomic events, it could be the sanctions, trade restrictions, custom duties. Uh, the recent events which happened between China and US. Because of that, trade tariffs were changed. Anything that can impact. So keep it very simple. This is how I will compile my market conditions price drivers. So what is the impact of these four components on your natural rubber pricing? Do you expect the price to go up, or do you expect the price to come down? So these, on very simple level, these are the three key components that I should be having in this strategy phase. So again, from the requirement gathering phase, to building a strategy phase. Now it's basically the execution mode, which we will go in depth later. The execution mode is about issuance of the RFX, and I'll tell you what the RFX is later. And after you issue the RFX, it's the PO release. After the sourcing, again, I'm skipping it because we have to cover this in the curriculum anyway. And then after this, you will have the receipt. And when you say you will have to have the receipt, it's the warehousing operations, consumptions. And once the material is consumed, some will have to update the inventory planning. And once the inventory is updated, the cycle repeats. The fourth point is where the payments, etc., will happen. And the fifth stage of the process would be the supplier performance management. All right, so overview. You should gather the requirement, identify yourself what kind of procurement you're doing. In this case, I have assumed raw material is the kind of buyer I'm having myself. Go into the strategy phase where you're actually building your annual view of requirement. You're defining who are your strategic vendors, what are their weaknesses. You are also defining the market conditions, basically whether you expect the price to go up or whether you expect the price to come down. You combine these three and you come up with a plan which you say, this is how I'm going to buy the natural rubber, which is the example I have taken in my year 2022. And basis that strategy document, you start issuing the RFX. We will see what RFX stands for. You release the PO, you receive the PO after shipping, you update the inventory after consumption. Someone will do the payments, and you with the supplier performance management aspect. Excuse me. So I'll come back. So on general purpose, this was a very 40,000 feet overview of how a transaction should run in a procurement process. Now I'm going to go into the first aspect, which is the demand planning and S&OP planning. So again, let's add a new sheet so that we can discuss, and I will say S&OP. Zoom in. All right. So what exactly is S&OP? Okay. All right. S&OP stands for Supply and Operation Planning Meeting. Not supply, my bad. Sales. Too many supply chain. All right. So sales and operation planning meeting. So if you remember, as part of the overview, the first step was requirement gathering. All right. So remember this. That is the objective of a sales and operation planning meeting. And I'll walk you through what happens in this sales and operation planning. So in an organization that is selling products to the consumers, for example, take tires, because I've worked in that industry, right? So I'll take tires as an example. It takes, let's say, 60 days from the first order to, let's say, the final delivery. All right. The first order to the final delivery at the dealer who's going to sell the tires. So basically what will happen is the dealer one, let's put it this way. Yeah. Dealer one, dealer two, three, four, five, six. And the touch points are sales execs, right? My company's sales executives who are interacting daily with these dealers who are selling to consumers would basically gather the data. How many tires or how many products will you sell next month or next 2 months or next 3 months? So let's say this guy says 300, 500, 200, 600, 700, 200, etc., etc., right? And so this same exercise will be done all across your footprint. If your company is selling pan, Pan-African or Pan-American or Pan-India basis. So basically, someone will have to gather the data from the dealers or sales execs to make an estimate of, okay, this is the demand that is coming through of our expected product, and this could be, let's say, in next 3 months. Okay, so what will happen is all the sales exec for their respective markets will do this exercise, and then someone will consolidate this from the sales planning team to say our annual view to sell the product in the next hour, sorry, not annual, in the next 3 months, we are going to sell 2,500 units of this product. All right. Now, it's very simple at this, but depending upon the maturity of the organization, either this sales exec has to talk to individual dealers, that's one, or we can use the previous historical data, use some machine learning, etc., to make an estimate of, okay, this is how seasonality of the demand is. So in January, let's say, for example, we sell 2,500 units, and in February, let's say, just make a random sort of a number. It's not really relevant. All right. So similarly, you will have demands for February, March, April, etc., etc., etc. Right? Now, so the sales representative will then hand over this 2,500 quantity to the operational planning manager. So this number is coming from sales, and the sales guy will then hand over this to the operation planning team. So the operation planning team will take assumption of, okay, in the next 3 months, we will need to manufacture 2,500 units. All right, the next 3 months. So in simple terms, what we will call this as a 3 months forecast. Now, before we go forward, there's one concept or a behavior I would like to talk about. The information that is coming from the sales execs through the dealers is usually not correct. Okay, people would like to inflate the demand because they want to do more business. So it's in the interest of dealer to inflate the numbers so that at least the material is available or the stock is available. So usually what happens is there's something called bullwhip effect. I will write it here. Bullwhip effect in S&OP. So what bullwhip effect is, when everybody starts to inflate by small amount. For example, this dealer 1 wants only 280, but he quoted 300, so the buffer is 20. Similarly, let's say dealer 2 can sell 490, but he said 500, so the buffer is 10, so on and so forth. So everybody starts to build buffers, and then it adds up to a big deviation, which you can see is 110 here. This effect is the starting point of the bullwhip effect, and I'll show you why it is called bullwhip also. So remember this, everyone is building buffers. That's why in this sales and operational planning meeting, the teams will deliberately discuss to reduce this number, cross-reference this number from some other source also. All right. So now when they hand over this data to the operational planning meeting, the operational planning meeting will do two things. One, they will talk to their factory managers. They will talk to their factory managers and give them this as a production plan, right? So this becomes a production plan. Now they can increase it, decrease it, etc., etc., but let's just stick with this number. So this 2,500 goes to the factory managers in terms of production plan. All right. Now what the production planning team will do is they will lock in the resources. Okay. So they will lock the resources in. What do I mean by lock the resources? You need manpower, you need raw materials, you need space in the warehouse, you need logistics to move the finished products. Uh, let's keep it like this for now. All right. So the factory manager would lay down, okay, I need to manufacture 2,500 units. I need X amount of manpower, Y amount of raw material. I need to ensure that I have sufficient space available in my warehouse. And then I need to secure the logistics or the trucks in advance so that I can move the finished product out from my warehouse. So these are the basically four things the factory manager will do. One, two, three, four. Okay. Since we are related to procurement in this session, let's focus only on the important part, which is the raw material. All right. Now, usually somebody in the production planning team will be able to break down to manufacture 2,500 units, how much raw material we need and what kind of raw material we need. All right. So let's focus on this. So what will happen is there's something called bill of material. What exactly we mean by this is basically to manufacture, let's say, a product A. The bill of material will specify, let's say, raw material 1. Let's say we need 5 raw materials, right? So to manufacture 1 unit of product A, basically how many units of material, raw material 1 I need, 2, 3, etc., etc., etc. So it's basically breaking down it's the recipe in very simple terms. All right. So to manufacture product A, I need 5 sort of raw materials, and usually there's a quantity. It's not XYZ. So for example, 20 units, 30 units, 50, 60, 70 units. So now you see this becomes a requirement. All right. And I would say this becomes a requirement for procurement team that in the next 3 months you have to deliver, not procure. You have to deliver 5 kinds of raw materials, and this is the quantity that I need. Remember, in 3 months, we have to deliver to the dealer. So now everybody needs to walk backwards. All right. So this activity becomes the, let's say, output of sales and operation planning meeting. It's nothing. It's just collecting the requirements from your sales team, sitting down together to deliberate on the numbers, giving the final number to the factory managers so that they can lock manpower, raw material, space, logistics, and hand over the raw material requirement to the procurement team. All right. And this happens every single month, right? So this keeps on getting revised every single month. Now, in all practical scenarios, no one talks about only one. So, for example, if I'm sitting in May today, let's say this is the July 2022 forecast, right? So usually the planning team will ask for, okay, this is July, give me 3 more months. So give me also for August, give me for September, give me for October, etc., etc., etc. So September. So July, August, September. So what the terminologies they will use is called M, M plus 3, M plus 5. And what basically means is M means your base month, which is July. Yeah. So M is July. And then M plus 3 would mean, let's say, October. All right. And M plus 5 basically mean December. I've seen for practical purposes, people giving M and M plus 3, which is July and October, and while discussing the requirements in May, right? Let's say the period is May. All right. So this is usually how M and M plus 3 forecasts are given. That's it. I think this is all I know about sales and operation planning meeting. Of course, I'm not going into the details, the templates. I think we can do a separate session. It's a quite a big topic, but I hope you get the idea of what happens in a sales and operation planning meeting. One point is who all are, let's say, what's a general participants looks like in this one. So you will have some sales manager who's actually consolidating the numbers from all the sales offices. You will have supply chain team here, someone from supply chain team, someone from procurement team, right? Usually there is a shared responsibility when you say supply chain. I'm assuming the factory managers can also come in as well. Now, this is a very simple level. Remember, if you have multiple factories, factory one, factory two, factory three, factory four, so there would be someone who would say, okay, 2,500 units. I have four factories. How do I divide this order in four factories? The complexity can be okay. For example, I have total orders of 2,500, right? And let's say we have total number of factories 4. So how would you divide? It's not simple average or something. To optimize the cost, each factory has a cost of manufacturing, and if they're at different locations, the cost of manufacturing can be different because your land cost, power cost, salaries, etc. could be different. Logistics is a big component as well. So someone will optimize, okay, these three dealers are closer to that location, so I will manufacture these three dealers from my factory one. Yeah, hold on. Factory one. And this dealer I can only serve to factory two. This is two, this is three. I don't need to manufacture for my fourth factory because my order would be fulfilled. So this planning again is a joint responsibility of supply chain and there is overall production team head. So I would say production team. That right. So this production head would basically optimize the distribution. So that's all what supply chain or sorry sales and operation planning meeting all about. Remember, we need to get the demand forecasts, convert those demand forecasts into a production plan, lock down your raw material requirement, and hand over that raw material requirement to procurement. That's it. Right. Let's go back. So we have just status. We have covered this. We have covered this. And the output, I'll say output as well. What the output of procurement process is, it's basically a strategy document, strategy and execution plan. Let's put it this way, right? Demand planning, the output would be raw material requirement for next 3 to 6 months. Okay. Now we are entering into a stage which is purchase requisition basics. Okay, let's do this. We covered the overview, supply chain. Now we are covering the purchase requisition. What exactly is purchase requisition? And I'll come back to this overview sheet. All right. Let's copy this, come here, and let's write stuff. Types of sourcing. Okay. Why don't I basically cover the whole section here? If we need to cover, I'll put it here. All right. Okay, so what exactly is a purchase requisition? In simple terms, purchase requisition is basically an entry in your ERP system, which is your enterprise resource planning, such as SAP, Oracle. There are tons and tons of ERP software. So if I'm the user, for example, I'll put it this way. There's a user, and if I need something, for example, I need to buy a laptop. So in most big organization, there will be a structured flow. And usually that flow, the first step of that flow is they will create a system entry, which is basically nothing but about capturing the data. What do you need? So purchase requisition is basically a requirement information form. As simple as that. Requirement information form. That's it. In that, you fill the information in terms of the product name, budget, if you know the budget. Otherwise, you can talk to procurement and put the value in. How many quantities you need, what's the delivery date you would like to have, uh, some details, technical details to describe. For example, if I'm buying a laptop, I would describe the specs of the laptop here, RAM, memory, hard disk space, etc., etc. All right, and that's pretty much it. Okay, this is all that I need to fill in that form, log the request, and create. In SAP, we call it as PR or purchase requisition. I think similar terminologies is used for Oracle and other systems also. So once you create this, what will happen? You will get a purchase requisition number, PR number, and after clicking it, it goes through a series of approval cycle, which we will cover. But usually you will get output as PR number. All right. So coming back to 3.1, purchase requisition is basically nothing but a requirement information form, which is filled by the end user who wants that service. Taking example of the laptop, I will write my model number, MacBook Pro. I would write the budget information if I know that how much it costs. Some organization will have a mandatory requirement of putting the budget in. Some organization will not need this budget information. My personal view is asking user to input the budget. It's really old school and it slows down the process, but I can cover that sometime in future sessions. Coming back, I would also need to input the quantity, delivery dates, technical details, which is specification, etc., etc. Click create, and you will get something called PR number. Okay, so that's step one, 3.1. All right. Now we move to 3.2, which is basics of budget approval. So what will happen is once this PR number is generated, it has to go through a budget approvals. Again, this is very, very specific to the particular organization that you are running or working in. But usually I've seen typically every requirement will have some sort of budget approvals. So if I'm creating a requirement for my laptop, my superior will have to approve that purchase requisition by going in the system. Scope and specifications. So after he clicks it, approved, then the PR state becomes PR state is released. All right. I should also mention this. So when you create a PR, the PR state is unreleased. Right? And when I say released, unreleased, it's approved, not approved, etc., etc. So usually, depending upon your budget, or let's say depending upon your requirement volume in terms of value, more the value of your PR, more the number of approvals you would need. etc., etc. Again, it's very specific to the organization. And this is where the budget approval comes into play. That you would need 1% approval or 2% approval or 3% approval, etc., etc. All right. Now this is done. Then we come to something called scope and specifications. I have covered this here, what we call as technical details, but let me expand this a bit. And I believe this is one area where a lot of one delay happens. Second, a lot of confusion happens due to exactly this 3.3, that is scope and specifications. A lot of managers would not be able to go at this level, and they expect their associates to solve it for them, but it usually the stumbling block, and it's usually where things go wrong. That's the starting point, right? What exactly is a scope and specification document? Ideally, as a procurement manager, I need to be told what exactly I need to buy. All right. And it becomes sort of a stumbling block if the user doesn't know what exactly he's buying, right? So there's a chicken and egg situation. I know I need to buy a laptop, but I would not be able to write this scope or specifications in the exact forms or in the exact manner. So this is one area which is becoming extremely, how should I say, common in big organization. It's the delay that is getting uh, increased day by day of getting the exact scope and specifications. There are ways to solve it because you can't expect end user to write a 10-page scope document before you can start your activity. There are ways to solve it. We will try to tackle it some other time, but remember, this is one area where you need to be extremely collaborative and extremely careful to get the requirements in. Now, why I say this is often users will either get the requirement from the internet and they will copy paste it, right? And usually that copy pasted requirement is posted by some particular vendor. So when you will copy paste the requirement and float it to your vendor base, only a particular kind of vendors will be able to meet. So you see, the public information which is broadcasted becomes the information for the scope. And then when you push it to your vendors, the vendor who posted on the internet would likely to be the highest match. So that's what I'm saying. It's a very tricky area to manage, but we'll not go into the details in this session. So to summarize, scope and specification is basically a Bible document that your end user should give you that should describe your requirement in detail, what exactly you want. Taking example of laptop, what's your screen size, RAM, what's your processor, etc., etc., etc. All right. Without this, you will not be able to start your sourcing process. Okay. Now, the last but not least in purchase requisition basics, we have material code and material code management. Very interesting. And I'm going into this granular level detail because I expect the associates who are creating purchase orders will go into, let's say, these kind of discussions with their team members, etc., etc. So what is material code and what is material code management? So remember when someone was creating a purchase requisition information, then each purchase requisition is basically tied to a kind of a product. So for example, if I'm buying a MacBook, in my system database, the MacBook will have a unique code attached to it, right? It's a unique code. And then later, when we will touch upon the inventory management section, I will tell you exactly why this unique code is needed. So each item that I'm buying needs to have a unique code. And that unique code is generally called as material code. In big organizations, you would see at least hundreds and thousands. So my maximum amount of material codes I have managed was about 1 million. 1 million unique codes for each and every item that was available in the factory. And what is material code management? So this requirement is each product should have a unique code is a very theoretical requirement, right? But it's absolutely necessary. Now, why I say material code management? Because let me give you a scenario. So let's say if this is MacBook Pro Space Gray, all right? Then the another thing is MacBook Pro White. And the third is only MacBook Air, right? Now, according to your view, will you have two unique codes for MacBook Pro Space Gray, MacBook Pro White, so that you can at least analyze in your system how many MacBook White or Space Gray you have, or you will only have one unique code, so which you will use for both of these products. Okay. Similarly, when someone wants to register a new item which is not there in your database, what kind of checks you will have? And the objective of material code management is avoid duplicate code creation, right? That's the primary objective of any material code management exercise. Why is it necessary? And I'm using this example of MacBook Pro, MacBook White, etc. I will show you what do I mean by avoid duplicate code creation. For example, when someone is trying to create the requirement information form, okay, I missed one step here. I think so, yeah, but let me come in here. So if I want to buy something today as an end user, for example, a MacBook, the first thing I will do is to check in the system or in my inventory whether I have that available already or not. All right. So the first check becomes here. Let's say I'm the end user who wants a MacBook. Okay. The first step would be check current stock or inventory. Usually there will be a dedicated person in the warehouse who will check the stock, and this is where the communication happens. If the answer is no, if you don't have the scope available or the stock available, then you go with the route of purchase requisition creation. Create purchase requisition. All right. So I'm trying to do sort of a flow chart thing here, but never mind. How do I? Yeah, club these together. So if the answer is no, then I will create a purchase requisition. If the answer is yes, that means if I have the material in my stock, I will not create the purchase requisition. I will say stock issuance or good issuance form. Again, it's a system-based entry. So the warehouse guy or the inventory management person should be able to help you with this one, which is a good issuance form. All right, so that's the first step. Now, check this. So the first step, if I want a MacBook, is do I have it in my stock or not? It depends upon someone going into the system and checking it. And the only way he checks it either by the name or by the material code. All right. And if I have two material codes for Space Gray, code 1, code 2, because let's say a poor decision, nobody checked, and then somebody created the new material code anyway for the same color, etc. The stock against this could be 0, and let's say the stock against this item in my system is 12. All right, just a hypothetical situation. So while checking this, one second. Yep. Okay. Hold on for a moment. All right. Okay. So while checking the stock, someone can use a wrong code and come up with the deduction that there is no inventory available for this item. Hence, they will go and create the purchase requisition. Whereas in a duplicate code, you could have an inventory sitting in there. All right. So the organization suffered because of poor inventory use, poor material code management, and that's the primary, most important objective of material code management. That is avoid duplicate creation. Because if you don't do that, what will happen is you will have excess inventory. And excess inventory would basically mean you will have higher working capital. You need more money to do your procurement, which hits your books. Your cost of procurement increases. You will also have slow moving inventory, and we will cover this concept. Basically, slow moving means if you're not going to use this 12 units, they're going to just sit there, right? And be a liability on your books. And usually organizations have systems in place or reports in place who will, or the reports will focus on how fast the good issuance has been. We will cover this later, but you get the idea. These are the four objectives of why a material code management should be there. Now, I haven't seen buyers doing this job. So in most of the organization, material code management is responsibility of a dedicated team. They would call the team as master data management team. In some organization, I have seen this responsibilities of the warehouse and inventory manager, but again, it's very specific to the particular organization structure. However, the nature of the work is same. Avoid duplicate code creation to prevent excess inventory, to reduce the working capital, and not to have any slow moving inventory. Okay, that's it, folks. This was about the purchase requisition basics. And now I'll go to our curriculum. So this we have covered also. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop in chats and I can answer them here. So the output of this is, let's say, an approved purchase requisition. And after checking internal stocks and getting required approval. Brilliant. All right. So we have covered this, covered this, covered this. Let's now start the sourcing process basics. All right. Similar to this, I will have sourcing process basics. Let me copy this. Wow, that's a big one, but we will get there. Awesome. Okay, give me 1 second. I'll just check if we have some comments, questions. No, that's fine. Awesome. All right. So let's start with the first one. Just to recap, we have gone through the overview already. We have seen what demand planning, S&OP planning is all about. We have also covered what exactly is purchase requisition, the approval process, and now that you have a purchase requisition which is approved, What's the next step? The next step is start the sourcing process. All right. So you would often see the term mentioned here, right? RFX. What exactly is that? RFI, RFP, RFQ, etc., etc. Okay, so let me decode these unnecessarily complicated words. X basically is a substitute for RFI, P in RFP, Q in RFQ. So it's basically codifying the whole structure, the semantics. RFI stands for, you can Google it, but let me put it this way, request for information. RFP is request for proposal, and RFQ is, oh, this is RFP, and RFQ is request for quotation. All right, that makes me realize that how archaic things have become in procurement, but we are sticking to what we have for now. RFI, let's start with this. So RFI is basically an informal way of communicating with your vendor. It's basically when you don't know the detailed spec, as we discussed during the purchase requisition phase, or you want to collect some sort of a budgetary information, or you're just testing the market. Okay. So a very high level, whether via the system or through the emails, etc., you will contact your supplier base, specifically highlighting this is an RFI, which basically means I'm collecting information at this stage. They can send you company brochures, they can send you the pricing, budgetary pricing, etc., etc., which basically you would then share with your end user so that they can know, okay, this is what is there in the market. And that's pretty much it. The only thing about RFI is you have to categorically tell your suppliers that it's only a RFI, means there is no intent to buy. I'm just fishing for information. I'm just checking what exactly the product looks like, etc., etc. So that's RFI. Okay. Now I'll move to RFP now, and there's a term called tendering. All right. You know about the government tenders. Big organizations tend to follow the same terminology, which they call as RFP. In RFP, what happens is it's a really complicated exercise, as they call it, where somebody would come in and would do technical evaluation. So there will be a team who will sit together for, and we will cover this later also. So technical evaluation. So the technical team which will do technical evaluation. There will be a commercial team who will do commercial evaluation. Now, what do we mean by a technical team and commercial team? The technical team is basically the team who's putting the scope of work together. If you remember, let's go to the purchase acquisition, the scope and specification. This is generally compiled by a dedicated technical team. All right. So the end user describes what he wants. Fine. Then this requirement is given to the technical team who will define the so-called idea or the wish list of the end user into a detailed technical document, and that team is the technical team. In that team itself, there will be people who are experts of analyzing the different products. All right, so those experts will then come together, and once the proposals are shared, they will read the proposals and do some sort of a technical scoring. Okay, so that's what we call as technical evaluation. Similarly, commercial evaluation is about the procurement team coming together. So the procurement team will analyze, okay, what's the pricing structure looks like, what are the terms and conditions, what are the warranty clauses, what are the penalties, what are the performance related criteria, etc., etc. So that's the commercial evaluation component. And many organizations have both the components, but they would combine these two components in different ways or form. So few organizations will have, okay, let's first see who meets my technical evaluation criteria, and then they will do the commercial evaluation. Some organizations will do this commercial evaluation, technical evaluation separately, and then combine it to find, okay, 60% technical weightage. For example, they can combine technical plus commercial and divide by 2, so that average of 2. Some would give you a higher weightage for technical, and some would give you a higher weightage for commercial. People play how to combine these two components together in various forms and structures. But keep it high level. RFP is a complex sourcing exercise where you are looking for the vendors to propose a solution. You don't have, let's say, a detailed, elaborate spec, so you're open for ideas. It's usually a solution oriented approach. So all the vendors will submit their proposals. There will be a technical evaluation team who will sit together and do a technical evaluation. Your procurement team will do a commercial evaluation. You merge the two things together, and the overall winner emerges. That's the RFP, tendering, etc. process all about. Now we have request for quotations. In the request for quotation, it's a bit simpler, meaning there will not be a detailed technical evaluation. Yes, there is a, so in this you have a defined scope or technical requirement document, right? So what do I mean by this is basically you're going there to buy a MacBook. You already know how much RAM you need. You already know what's the processor, SSD storage, what's the screen size, what's the RAM quantity you need, etc. So you already know the spec in detail. From no room for any confusion. It's locked in. You go out, go to your vendors, whoever the Apple dealer is, and you get the quotations in, right? So it's a very binary sort of an approach. Are you meeting my requirement or not? Yes, no. If you're not meeting my requirement, you're out. If you're meeting my requirement, I will then proceed towards who is giving me the best commercial deal. So in most of the cases, most, I'm not saying all, commercial analysis, let me put this way. Okay. So in most of the cases, request for quotation is fairly issue the requirement based upon the spec. Just ask him, are you meeting my requirement? Yes, no. If they say yes, you hand over to the procurement, who will then most likely choose the best pricing supplier and issue the PO. In some cases, the technical team might say, yes, although everyone is meeting the requirement, we would still want to come in and have a look. In that case, they will do a very quick sort of a, how should I say, not detailed technical evaluation, but they will do a technical assessment, screen through basically to see if all the things are in order or not. Okay, so RFI, RFPs, and RFQs. Done. So that's the basics of these three. All right, I'm gonna put these things, leave it here. That's fine. Oh, wait. Now let's move into the basics of supplier selection. Now, if you have, for example, and I'm structuring my thought process here. When you know the requirement already, and let's say we will stick with RFP as an example here because it's the most complex and has the wide array that we can discuss. After deciding that you want to issue a RFP, the next question is, okay, what is your vendor base? All right. Who is the right vendor that you should be inviting for this RFP exercise? And this area is often very poorly managed. And the reason I'm saying very poorly managed is it depends upon one, how well you know your suppliers. And I'm saying not from person perspective, but I'm saying from their product quality performance, their pricing performance, uh, issues related to their deliveries, complaints at the ground level. So how well you know your supplier. I haven't seen a data-driven approach in supply selection process till date. Okay, most of the cases, what people would do is they would take, let's say, their existing base of the last 1 year or so and compile that list and then send it out. Okay, but that's a very robotic approach. Anyone can do that. So, in my view, basics of supply selection. Let me zoom in. Involves one, sorry, their performance on quality and, let's say, delivery. There could be many aspects. Second, you have to consider their market share. Are they a dominating player or they're just new entrant? Because market share can potentially indicate some sort of risks that you are getting exposed to. Third is what is their execution ability? Are they going to outsource this RFP to someone else, or are they going to do this by themselves? Do they have enough resources available at the delivery site, wherever your delivery location is, etc., etc. Okay. The fourth is where I would say what is their cost competitiveness. Cost competitiveness. Are they expensive? Are they always? I'm sorry, hold on. Yeah. So are they expensive? Are they always giving you the best price possible, etc., etc., etc. And the last but not the least is what is their technical expertise. Right? Should have started with this, but anyway, technical expertise. Are they even are they even able to deliver what they're claiming? So, in my view, before you compile your supplier selection list, and to clarify, this is for issuance of RFP. Okay, let me say RFX, not the award, issuance of RFX. So these are the five factors you have to consider for each and every supplier. And as I said, not all the vendors, or sorry, not all the supplier managers or buyers are even able to grasp this fundamental today. What basically they will do is go out into their ERP, pull out the last 1 year data, collect the names of the vendors, and that's pretty much it. Okay. If you if you select five bad suppliers and issue the RFP and then select the best from the worst or best from the out of all five worst supplier, then you are compromising the whole process already, right? I think this is where a strong foundation can be laid if you're just starting up your career. So have these five parameters as the basis of your supplier selection. It's the most underrated area today in procurement sourcing process. Okay. All right. Now let's move to the basics of commercial terms. Okay. Let's move here. So what do we mean by basics of commercial terms? Let me highlight it with some other color. Okay. Let's start. Basics of commercial terms. I love it. What happens is when you are talking with vendor, there are few buzzwords everybody will throw in your directions. And if you're starting up, you will either pretend that you're understanding them, and that will be extremely risky because you could be talking absolutely nonsense without understanding. Or second, you will have to deny and lose your face that I don't know, I don't have the expertise right now to talk in that particular language. So over a period of time, your vocabulary will increase. But I would lay down some of the commercial terms for you, and then you can probably expand on it later on. All right. So some of the commercial terms or structures, if I put it this way, how do you structure a commercial deal? You structure in terms of, let's say, the delivery timeline. Okay. When I say delivery timeline, remember, I'll take you back to the kind of sourcing you're doing, which is here. Okay. Let me put this tape up somewhere here, because the kind of sourcing you're doing determines how do you structure the deal. Okay. But every deal will have a delivery timeline. This could be one time, all, or staggered. Okay. Your delivery time can also have components of the products getting delivered first, products delivery, such as in terms of equipment, the equipment will come together. There could be some assembly which is required, and we will cover this later. So product delivery happens, then it will be followed up by, let's say, the installation and commissioning. So if a machine is getting delivered, you will have the installation and commissioning phase. There will be a dry trial, which is, for example, after the equipment has reached, some some technical expert from supplier will fly down to your delivery site, assemble the machine for you, and will try to run it. What we call as dry trial, and there will be a wet trial as well. Wet trial is basically feeding the actual, let's say, the product through the machine and looking at the output. So it's a trial as if the machine is already into the production environment, etc., etc. So it's important to note that this is how equipment gets delivered and installed. For you, why I'm giving you this information at this stage is your whole job during the commercial term phase is to how do you de-risk, right? So probably you will stagger your payment according to the deliveries that you're getting. So some component of the payment at delivery stage, some component at the installation and commissioning, some component at dry trial, some component at wet trial, so on and so forth. Again, these all four components may not be applicable to all, let's say, the sourcing event or kind of sourcing, but the principle I'm giving you is analyze what's your delivery medium. Is it one time? Is it staggered? And accordingly match your payment terms, right? Payment term schedule. So depending upon the delivery, match your payment schedule also to de-risk, etc., etc. All right. Some of the terms which I'm going to tell you now are basically covered here, but I'll show you, or rather I'll write it down for you, and then we'll pick it up one by one in the individual section. So when I say commercial terms, you have to analyze the delivery schedule, which we have already spoken. What's the delivery time looks like? Second, what's the payment term schedule looks like? Third is what the shipping term is, what we call as Incoterms. Incoterms is nothing but international commercial terms. So in very simple terms, who's doing the shipping actually? Is supplier doing the shipping? If supplier is doing the shipping, at till what stage the shipping is being done? I'll show you a chart. We'll probably try to fish it out from the internet. But there's a shipping term component attached to it. After this, there is a, actually when you say payment term schedule, I will say payment term mode, right? And payment term mode would be, let's say, are you doing bank transfers, or you have letter of credits? I mean, it's also bank transfer, but there's something called letter of credits, and we will go there as well. There are bank guarantees involved, and I'll show you what kind of bank guarantees are we talking about. We have two, three types of bank guarantees, etc., etc. Okay, so we have covered the delivery time, payment terms, shipment terms, payment term mode we have covered. Yes, in fact, that is covered in Incoterms only. So I will stop it. Then we have insurance. right? And we will cover this aspect also. So who's doing the insurance for the delivery? Uh, what kind of coverage you have? Is it only the shipping coverage or you have warehouse coverage, etc., etc., etc. So these are the some of the commercial terms. Sixth is the performance management. For example, if the required product is not performing up to your expectation, are you going to impose any kind of deliveries? If the So this is performance management and penalties, if I put it this way, performance management and penalties, right? And this can happen in terms of if the shipment is getting delayed, so you have late delivery, right? Yeah, if the shipment is getting delayed, then there's a late delivery and what we call as LD clause. Rather, I should separate it out. I'll start with LD clause, right? LD clause basically refers to the liquidated damages clause, and this liquidated damages can happen because of late delivery, because of poor performance, or butterfinger, or let's say you have breach of contract. Yeah, done. So LD can happen because of the three breach of contract. LD can happen because of these three. Now, the way generally we deal with LD, should I cover LD separately? Hold on. I think I should cover LD separately. Otherwise, this will become quite hectic. Let me add a new clause here. Say we will cover basics of LD calculation. All right, good. All right, so there's LD basically that gets involved. So what are the commercial terms? Delivery time, try to understand it's staggered or one time. Payment term schedule, how many stages you will have in terms of payments. Shipping term, and we will go into Incoterms later. How will you do the payment? Through a letter of credit, bank transfers, some bank guarantees, etc. You will have insurance component. You will have performance management and penalties, or rather, sort of performance management penalties, I'll say. Performance management, how will you measure whether the product is performing or not? There will be a LD clause, which is the liquidated damages clause for late delivery, poor performance, breach of contracts, etc. etc. Am I forgetting something? Yes. The last is about some sort of a retention payments. Again, it's part of the delivery first one, but need to mention it separately. Basically, retention means although that you have delivered me the, for example, equipment and it is installed and you have done the wet trial, I would still like to keep a component of payment on hold because I want to see the actual performance while the equipment is running. Now, this performance evaluation period can be 3 months or 6 months, and that's the retention payment all about. All right. All right. So this pretty much covers. Let me think if I have missed something in terms of commercial terms. Da, 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 da. Yes, sorry. You have also price escalation clauses. Very important. What do we mean by price escalation? Poor word choice by me, but I think I will try to explain you. You have to fix your risk in terms of if there is a major movement in crude oil price, is a major port strike, etc., etc. The vendor should not come back to you and say my price has gone up, please revise the purchase order, etc., etc. Right? So you may or may not choose to have a fixed priced contract. Really depends the kind of sourcing you're doing. If you have a fixed price contract, then you should have this clause which will say under no circumstances the prices will be increased. If you don't have a fixed price contract, it is generally tagged to, let's say, some market formula pricing, etc., etc. Put the pricing mechanism here. Pricing mechanism. Now, What do we mean by pricing mechanism? I cover it separately. Awesome. The list goes on. List goes on. So move everything below, and then they say basics of pricing formula or mechanism. I'll speak briefly on this one. All right, so leave it for now. So some sort of a formula by which you should be able to calculate the prices, etc., needs to come here also. Done. All right, so now, my dear friends, we'll move to a bit detailed topic in terms of Incoterms. All right, which is here. Can I do? What I can do is increase the column. Yeah, move towards right. Done. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get something from the internet on the Incoterms. Second, that then I can explain you in much more clear terms. Okay, let me share with you what I'm looking at. All right. So I've searched for Incoterms 2022. There's no 2022. So it's Incoterms 2020. That was the last version. Oh no, there's a new one. Okay. So search for Incoterms 2022. Let's go to images and let's try to pick something that makes sense. This one. That's way too confusing. Okay, I think I can use this one. This should be fine. All right. All right, so let's save it. Awesome. Okay, so what exactly is a Incoterm? Incoterm stands for International Commercial Terms. Okay. In simple language, it basically means when a product is required to be moved from supplier's factory or warehouse to your factory and warehouse, who is responsible for the transportation from end to end. Okay. And that's the concept. So there is a defined terminology which is used while you're negotiating your contract so that it becomes easier for everyone to communicate without explaining in 10,000 pages. So these are the Incoterms which you are able to see on your screen. Let's start with the first one. Sorry. Let's start with first one, which is EXW. EXW stands for X works. Okay. X works basically mean the supplier will finish the packaging and leave it at his warehouse, supplier warehouse. Everything else buyer has to do and pay for. What are the activities involved? For example, you will have to do a packaging. Okay. You will have to arrange for logistics, meaning picking up the product from supplier's factory and take it to the custom clearance port of the export country, pay for the custom duty, pay for that insurance of the domestic part, then pay for the sea freight or air freight to transport it from supplier's country to your country, arrange for the custom clearance in your country, pay for the movement from your country's port to your warehouse and then insure the whole trip and pay the premium as well. That is what an end-to-end responsibility looks like. Okay, and that is what we mean by X works. Similarly, we have common ones such as FOB. I will skip the rest. You can Google and read it for yourself. FOB basically means free on board, and free on board means supplier will pay for all the costs which are involved till loading the material or the consignment on the ship in a sea freight. All right. So all the costs involved till loading it on the ship is borne by the supplier. It does not include the ocean freight or the marine insurance. So only till loading it on the ship, supplier will pay for it, and everything else after it, the ocean freight, the marine insurance, the custom clearance cost, the domestic transport, will be paid by the buyer. That is what FOB means. The most popular one after this would be CIF, which is cost, insurance, and freight. What basically this means is supplier will pay till the freight charge. So everything from export packaging, formalities, loading, freight, origin port, freight forwarder fees, ocean freight, etc., till the destination will be paid by the supplier. Okay. Everything after it, meaning the custom clearance you have to do in your country, plus duties that you have to pay, plus the domestic transport you have to arrange from moving from your country's port to your factory through trucks, etc., is paid by you, and the local insurance as well. That is what CIF means. The most convenient one is what we call as DDP, all right, which is delivered duty paid. In DDP, you don't have the buyer has to do absolutely nothing in terms of the logistics. It's the complete responsibility of the supplier to deliver it till the warehouse. So call it as Amazon, right? So the Amazon delivers everything to your home, and that is what DDP term means in the industry reference. All right. I will What I can do is I can post a link to this maybe sometime later so that you can refer Incoterms 2020, search it on the internet. The way to read this chart is vertical, not horizontal. So all the points which are highlighted in orange is the seller responsibility. The points which are highlighted in blue are basically buyer responsibility. So you see buyer responsibility is the highest in terms of X works, and it's absolutely lowest in terms of DDP. Okay, so when you're negotiating for the contracts, you have to talk Incoterms as part of your deal as well. Moving on to our sheet. So that is what Incoterms is. Let me take a pause here and see if there are questions. Deb is saying, what's the future of the concept like safety stock or just in time, that is JIT, given the challenges around raw material availability and source of supply the pandemic and the war has presented? I really appreciate your question. I think it's quite relevant considering the macroeconomic challenges that we are facing. Um, I'll try to answer this question or give you my perspective, but I think it goes beyond the basic concepts that we are trying to cover. So a really quick one on this point is I think for at least this time the concept has gone just in time. No one is using it because everyone is struggling to get the stocks in the factory. Everyone is struggling to get the shipping containers, and you have seen the amount of ocean freight charges or the freight charges that have increased. So for this brief period, I think buyers are struggling to keep the factories running until this volatile scenario will continue, which I can see at least till 2022 end or even 2023 first half. I don't think so. Just in time will be the first choice for inventory management. Everyone that I know of is building the buffer capacities because of the supply chain crisis, because of the chip shortages, etc., etc. So for next 1.5 year, I don't think so. The just in time or the lean inventory management concepts will be popular. Everyone is in a de-risking phase right now. Thanks. But I really appreciate your question. All right, moving on. So we have covered the Incoterms. Now we are moving to the payment terms, bank guarantees, letter of credits, performance guarantees. Exciting. All right. Now we are here, right? So when you're talking about the contract, it will be foolish to pay everything in advance, isn't it? Like why you should pay everything in advance, 100% all the payment. So it's your job to negotiate as a buyer with the supplier of how you can de-risk the whole payment cycle. And that is what we do when we say payment term schedule. So some of the payment terms that I have used historically would involve, let's say, start with a clear one. All right. Let's say payment terms. Yeah. Okay. Payment terms. Now, there's no fixed formula, but I would first assess the need. What's the industry standard? For example, when you're doing a manufacturing of an equipment, it's very standard to give a typical percent as advance. It's a multi-million dollar sort of an equipment. 100% after delivery is generally not the way to go. So there's some typical percentage which is involved as advance. Then depending upon your Incoterm, for example, people would say pay X% before shipping, pay Y% against against sorry against shipping documents, and we will cover this during the freight forwarding portion or the custom clearance portion. Shipping documents basically means is the proof that the vessel has sailed, and we will talk about the documents which are involved. So pay Y% against shipping document, pay Z%, for example, after delivery. So I'm breaking down the milestones, and then we will see how we can choose a particular ratio. So either you pay in advance, pay something before shipping, pay something against a shipping document, pay against delivery, pay against installation and commissioning, installation and commissioning, pay X% against or after wet trials, pay X% after dry trials. Sorry, this should be first and this should be second. Okay, then pay X% against performance, bank guarantees, performance. Let's put it this way. All right, so let's start with first one. If someone is asking you to pay as advance, right? There's a risk that supplier may disappear and you lose your money. All right. So the trade-off is you can agree to give advance, but you need some sort of a guarantee. So there's a guarantee called advance payment guarantee, advance bank guarantee. Let me put it this way. Yeah. Now, what this bank guarantee basically means, it's sort of an arrangement or insurance, if I put it this way, in typical terms. It's a document that authorizes the buyer to get the payment from bank against advance that buyer will pay to the supplier. And in that document, there will be certain terms and conditions. For example, the conditions would be proof of payment of advance from buyer to supplier. Check. Supplier has not responded on conditions A, B, and C. All right, check. And when those conditions are fulfilled, for example, I paid advance, I've attached the proof, and supplier has disappeared, I reminded once, reminded twice, I established for a fact that it's not responding. Using that guarantee, which is the advance bank guarantee, I can go to the bank and get my money back. So bank will pay to me. I don't have to depend upon supplier anymore. Okay. But again, it's a contract. So those conditions are pretty standard. I'll not go into the details of how to form a bank guarantee. It's basically an insurance of the advance payment. So you pay to the supplier, supplier gives you this guarantee, which is issued by the bank, not by the supplier. And in case the supplier disappears, you go and take this bank guarantee document, present it to the bank, and you'll get your money. There's a cost attached to it, which is usually borne by the supplier. What happens in the background is, if my buyer, let's say I'm a supplier now, if my buyer says I can pay you 2 million as an advance if you give me a bank guarantee of equivalent amount. So I will go to my bank, I will say, this is my purchase order that I have got from my buyer. He wants me to give him a 2 million bank guarantee. So issue me a 2 million bank guarantee. What the bank will do is, bank will lock in that 2 million from my, let's say, current account of supplier. So my money is locked in. And then the bank will charge a percentage of service fee to the supplier and then will issue a document, which again is coming from the bank, not from the supplier. And this document is then given to the buyer. So I will give it to my buyer. And the buyer can then present it if the conditions, as I mentioned before, are not met and get the money back. Okay, so if someone asks you for an advance payment, always, from my perspective, ask, give me an advance bank guarantee. Okay, what you what you should also ask is lower your price. Why? Because the more advanced supplier will get, he doesn't have to go out and fight for the capital, right? When I say capital, he doesn't have to loan money from the bank. So if I give 2 millions now, it's interest-free money, and then usually that component is a good negotiation leverage. So higher the advance, the better your unit price should be. If you're getting the same unit price, you're getting a bad deal. Okay, never agree for an advance without these two components. Then people can ask you, okay, I'll pay you before shipping, and then I can pay you after shipping. Deliveries, installation, commissioning, dry trial, wet trial, vehicles, performance. I think these we have covered already, so I'm not touching these. The last one is against performance. So similar to advanced bank guarantee, we also have something called performance bank guarantees. Performance bank guarantee. All right. Similar concept, but it's more, let's say, dependent on whether the equipment is performing or not. All right. So the concept of performance bank guarantee is, I have procured, let's say, the equipment for $10 million. Right. It's a big risk for me because someone can just put things together and give it to me. Depending upon your payment terms, by the time I know the fact that, oh, the equipment is not performing, I have already paid so on and so much. Right. So now to de-risk that, I typically hold a certain percentage. So in most of the cases, it will be 5% only. Okay. And in that document, which is performance bank guarantee document, what will happen is the supplier will list the conditions, which is similar to, let's say, in advanced bank guarantees, but this time it is specifically linked to the performance of the equipment that he has delivered, which is, my equipment should run for 24 hours not stop without any fault. My equipment should deliver so on and so forth, so much amount of performance. It should not have any noise, etc., 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 whatever it is, right? If my equipment doesn't perform to these preset of conditions, my bank should pay to the buyer 5% of the total deal value. That's it. Okay. Then similar to the advance guarantee thing, the supplier will give me performance bank guarantee. And then if my equipment is not performing and the supplier is not responding, we would probably go and get the money back to the tune of 5%. And again, it's a negotiation point that happens. All right. So these are the payment terms that is generally involved when you're negotiating for the contracts. Okay. Now, what did I miss? Yes, I missed one point, which is called LC. LC, I'll mention here. LC basically stands for letter of credit. Okay, letter of credit. Now, one thing before we move there, this is in short, people also call advanced bank guarantees as ABG or BG, and performance bank guarantee as PBG or PG again. All right, so now we move to letter of credit. All right, so what exactly is letter of credit? I think I'll keep it at very, very high level. Letter of credit is basically to bridge the trust gap between buyer and supplier. All right, because if someone is transacting for the first time as a buyer, I have my concerns that supplier will not be able to give me anything. I don't know, he can take my money and disappear. Sorry. And for supplier, it's the same stuff, right? If I manufacture my equipment and the buyer doesn't buy, then all my money is gone. So to trust, to bridge this trust gap, I think back in 1900s, I don't remember the exact year, the banks came up with some sort of instrument, which is still going on till date. And it surprises me because we have blockchain now, it should disappear. But anyway, so this instrument is called letter of credit. What happens is, here's the buyer. This is the bank. This is, sorry, this is the bank of buyer. Okay. And let's say here is the seller, and this is the bank of seller. All right. If we decide that we want the payment to happen after shipping document, but through letter of credit, all right, because there could be other modes also. You can do a bank transfer, all right. But the problem with bank transfer is if I don't ask my bank to transfer the money, the bank will not transfer the money, right? So the risk of the seller is highest. So he will say, no, I will not agree to the bank transfer. I need to go give me a letter of credit. Okay. So what the letter of credit is, again, same concept as the some sort of a agreement or contract. Not the right word, but I'm trying to give you the gist of it. So the buyer will go to his bank and basically say, I need to buy a machine or an equipment from this supplier, and I need a letter of credit of, let's say, $6 million. So the bank, what they will do is they will say, they will collect the details of the seller. Okay. Let's say the seller is in, I don't know, Germany. Okay. And the buyer, sorry to mention, seller is in Germany, buyer is in India. So the bank in India, that is for the buyer, will contact a reputed bank with which they already have a relationship in Germany. So now it's the communication between banks and banks. It's not the communication between buyer and seller. Okay. Now, so this bank will commit $6 million to the seller bank, given there are some conditions which are fulfilled. For example, if the most common one would be, I will pay 40% against shipping document via LC, letter of credit. So if this is the condition you have negotiated in the PO, the bank will put this condition in that certificate, and when seller will submit or show his bank saying that See, I have shipped the material. These are the documentary evidences. The seller bank will demand payment from the buyer and will set that shipping document copy to the buyer bank, and the buyer bank is now obligated to make the payment. Okay. Theoretically, they don't need to contact, or they don't need to take approval from buyers also. They only do as for your information sort of an activity, so that buyer is aware that the document has arrived in the bank and they are now making the payment. So when the bank is satisfied that all the conditions in that certificate, letter of credit, has been fulfilled, they will make the payment directly to the seller bank, and the seller will then give it to the seller itself. So you see, the bank has taken away the power from the buyer to instruct the bank transfer, which was the risk. Yeah, it's a trust deficit that banks are paying on. Banks are banking on. Banks are banking on. Okay. Now, to do this, bank charge a hefty fee. So, for example, your 6 million USD, each bank will negotiate with your corporate finance team, and you probably have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars and call it as convenience fee, etc., etc., etc. All right. If I remember correctly, the name of the organization is called UCLC. Let me hold on, please. If you want to read this in detail, you see. Yes, sorry. So I'll show you now. 1 second. I think it is UCP 600. Letter of credit. Yes, UCP 600. Yes. So if you want to read more about letter of credits, because I have not even touched the surface of letter of credit, go and search for UCP 600, which is Uniform Custom and Practice for Documentary Credits, and you can learn more about it. Basically, someone will have to become a notify party, so, and you have to hypothecate the asset or the equipment. So it means the equipment belongs to the bank, you become the notify party, and the seller becomes the receiving party, etc., etc., etc. So there are a bunch of things available. uh, Go and read the UCP 600 if you're really interested in learning more about letter of credits. All right, so let's skip through. Now we have completed these 5, and I will now go to the basics of custom clearance. All right, let me take 2-3 minutes, 5-minute break, and then I'll come back. I need to make a coffee. Hold on, please. So I'll put a timer, or rather, I'll write here. Okay. Coffee break. Back in 5 minutes. All right, let's start. Let's put some good music. Okay, we begin with session number two. Awesome. So we covered everything related to RFX, supply selection, commercial terms, Incoterms, payment terms, and letter of credits. Now I'm going to touch upon the basics of custom clearance. All right. My experience with the custom clearance has only been restricted to the Indian custom clearance procedures. So, pardon me if I'm going off track as far as your country's custom clearance process is concerned. Uh, but I think the overall concept should remain same. All right, so let's start with custom clearance process. Custom clearance process. All right, my dear friends, everything in custom clearance is codified. We have something called HS code, right? Let me tune down the volume a bit. Hold on. Okay, HS. Okay. So yeah, so everything in custom clearance start with HS codes. HS code starts with is harmonized system. That's what they have termed it as. It's basically a universal codified system to identify what are you importing or what are you exporting, right? It's accepted by majority of the nations around the world, and it's used extremely frequently, almost every single time for the international trade. All right. Who defines the HS code? It's the World Customs Organization. Believe me or not, that is the name, WCO, and they define all these codes, and the countries would then adopt these HS codes internally as well. Okay, so the first key step as part of the custom clearance process, the custom clearance process would involve first, what are you importing or exporting? All right, and as I said, I'm only focusing on the Indian import custom clearance process because I was a buyer and then that's what I was exposed to. So this, what are you importing, exporting, starts with HS code. For example, when I was buying natural rubber, the HS code for the natural rubber, let me look it up really quickly. I can show you as well, right? 1 second. So there you go. Yeah. So I would go, what is the HS code for natural rubber? HS code for natural rubber. Every product has natural rubber. So this is my code, right? 411 and then three zeros. Okay. I'm going to break it down for you because a lot of the things are same in this one. And let me open this one. So HS code for natural rubber is 411 three zeros. I think that's what we saw. 1 second. Yeah, all right. I think yes. So what happens is 4,000. So this is a combination of chapters and sections. So for example, 4001 is a chapter, right? And that chapter would be, for example, so this is a chapter, how not 4,000, sorry, 40. So first two characters are chapters. So it's basically anything that is related to rubbers and articles, etc., right? And under this 40 chapter, you have a heading code, so which is 01, okay? So which becomes 4001. So this 4001 becomes natural rubber, etc., okay? And then depending upon further whether it's type A or type B, further codes are added, and then after that it's all zeros. But you get the idea, right? So there is a defined way of identifying what are you importing in the country. Your custom clearance agent should be able to help you with this, or you can go to your custom website and then find by typing what are you importing. So what's the HS code? Why this is important? This is important because according to the HS code, your custom duty structure and the custom duty amount is decided. So HS code for natural rubber is this one. This will give me what my custom duty looks like. It could be a 10%, 20%, etc., etc. And there's a structure of custom duty. Okay. Under the custom duty, you have a basic custom duty, right? Basic custom duty, some duty. Sometimes there is CVD, if I remember correctly, that's countervailing custom duty. There is ADD, which is additional, I don't remember the full name, but there is additional duty, custom duty. So on top of this, you may have taxes, different sort of taxes on these duty structures. Okay. So basically, this is how, based upon your HS code, your custom duty tariff will be calculated. Okay. Another important point that you need to remember is how the custom duty is calculated. So calculation of custom duty. Custom duty at all times will be calculated based on the total value. All right. Doesn't matter whatever your Incoterms is. FOB, CIF, X-Works, doesn't matter. You have to give the total cost to customs. The total cost will be your unit price, sorry, your total price, packaging price, not custom, packaging price, your logistics, which is your freight, and your insurance. Okay, so CIF, as we put it this way, CIF value. So custom duty is always paid on the CIF value. All right. And usually what custom will do is, based upon your tariff structure, they will calculate, let's say 20% of CIF value or 30% of CIF value, and that is the custom duty you have to pay for importing that, right, into the country. Most of there is a typo, hold on. If it is FOB, going into a bit more granular level, if it is FOB, you will not have freight, you will not have insurance information from the supplier. So, but then you have to declare by going into the custom portal. So every country's custom department has an online system, most likely. And whenever you are importing something, you have to go into that custom system and put some information in. And I'll tell you what information is. It's basically you are telling the custom agency, this is my shipment, this is the HS code for that transaction, this is the total price, packaging price, freight, and insurance. You feed that information in, and the custom system will calculate the duty for you according to the HS code, and then you pay the duty online. And then you get some documents which we'll talk about. So that's how you calculate the custom duty. Is custom duty refundable? No. I'll put it this way. There are certain circumstances you can get the custom duty back if you are re-exporting the cargo, but it's too much detail. We'll skip it for next time around. Most likely you should consider custom duty is not refundable. Awesome. Okay. So we now know what HS code is. We also know what kind of duties are involved. Basic, countervailing duty, CVD. Additional ADD was anti-dumping duty. My bad. I will not go into what anti-dumping duty is. It's a topic for another day. Anti-dumping duty. It's not always applicable. It's only applicable in certain circumstances. If you really want to understand this, so US imposed anti-dumping duties on goods of Chinese origin during the Trump phase. You should read about it, etc., etc., etc. So that's the Type of custom duty. Now, calculation of custom duty, as I told you, it's always on the CIF value. You have to upload it into the portal and pay it online, most of the cases. Okay, so what happens in a custom clearance process? Okay, this is the maths, but what exactly happens when a shipment arrives? So when there are so many ships on a custom port, you probably need someone who can act on your behalf to talk to the custom authorities. And in India, we call that thing as, or call that agency as CHAs, or Custom House Clearing Agents, right? You appoint these guys to a contract. Now, these CHAs have feet on the ground. That means they have dedicated personnel on the ports looking out for your shipment, going and submitting the papers to the relevant authorities. So the first step is CHA will you will tell to the CHA, see, these are the shipping documents. What are shipping documents? Okay. How do you tell CHA that the shipment is coming? Remember the LC discussion that we had so far? So let's say shipping document, right? So when seller will tell you a shipping document is basically nothing. It's your invoice. It's something called bill of lading. Bill of lading means when you put your cargo consignment on the ship, they will give you a receipt. Let me show you. Don't need to explain, but it's sort of a receipt that yes, the goods have been loaded onto the ship. Again, very, very old system, but it's still being followed. So this is what we call as bill of lading. I think this should be fine. Can we read it? Yeah, sort of. Okay. So here it's the shipping line name. And this is basically the bill of lading. Here you will have something called bill of lading number. Then this box usually, let me open a new one. Yeah, much better. So there you go, the bill of lading number. What did I do? No, 1 second. Okay, so this is the bill of lading number. It's usually the tracking number like your Amazon Express or DHL Express. This is the usually here you will have the name of the shipping line. So if you go to another one, so this is the name of the shipping line on which this has been loaded. Then you in this one you will have the information of, let's say, the product description. This description should match your invoice. Anyway, we'll cover this in some other session. Incoterms, you have port of loading, you have port of discharge, who's paying the freight, etc., etc., etc. Who's going to be notified, who's the consignee, and all this information needs to tally with your invoice, needs to tally with your letter of credit. Otherwise, you will face what we call as discrepancies, and custom won't clear your consignment. All right, so this is what we call as bill of lading. So you need an invoice, you need a bill of lading, you need something called packing list, and packing list is nothing but things which is packed in containers, how many containers, etc. I can show you packing list example also. Um, should be okay. Yeah, I think this can work, but I need a better one. Yeah, this is better. So what this packing list is just same information, the invoice number, who's the applicant, port of loading, port of discharge, description of the goods. But on this packing list is basically you're telling how many boxes are there and in which container, because you ship using containers, in which container which box is there and what's the container number, etc., etc., etc. So that's all what a packing list is. So you put the invoice, bill of lading, packing list. You need supporting documents such as insurance, marine insurance, there's the insurance certificate that you will get, what's the insured value, we will look into this later, etc., etc. And then that's pretty much it. These are the four things. Sometimes customs can request for additional document, such as show me the product brochure or tell me more about what are you importing. But more 90-95% cases, these are the four primary documents that they will ask. So what happens is when you give this information to your custom house clearance agent, CHA, yeah, so this information goes to CHA. The CHA will start tracking the shipment using the bill of lading number. Usually the custom would also tell you that these ships have arrived, and then CHA will then upload all these documents on customs portal, claiming the right that this is my shipment because of these shipping documents, and he will pay the custom duty to you. After the duty has been paid, what will happen is there will be an inspection by the custom authority, right? In some countries, you first pay the duty, then the inspection happens, and in some countries, the inspector will inspect the container, the contents of your container, give a go ahead, and then you pay the custom duty. Could be different, but let's see, right? So there will be inspection by government. So basically, the CHA agent, which is there on the ground, will submit the documents, and then a slot will be given where the government official will go and open the container, inspect the contents according to the packing list, invoice, bill of lading, and give a go ahead to clear the consignment. So once this is done, it's usually out of gate. There's a technical term for this out of gate. I'm forgetting about it, but never mind. So it gives approval for the out of gate, and then it goes out of the custom consignment. So usually this these are the three processes that happens. One important point I want to cover after you have understood this process is how can you reduce custom duties, right? And this is where the smartness of procurement managers should come in. The way you can reduce the custom duty lawfully is one, and I'll write it, ways to reduce the custom duty legally. Okay. One, you have to use FTAs, which is free trade agreements. All right. Now, it's the responsibility of your CHA or even buyer to know that the country where your supplier is shipping from, for example, Thailand or Indonesia or Malaysia for the natural rubber, whether your country, an example being India, has any free trade agreement with that particular country or not. Most likely, your country will have some sort of a free trade agreement. Check those agreements and whether your product, which is the HS code, is part of this free trade agreement, right? If yes, then you don't have to pay the standard custom duty. There will be a subsidized custom duty, which is lower than this. But if you don't tell the FTA, if you don't declare that I'm importing the shipment under this FTA agreement, you will end up paying the standard duty. It's your responsibility, it's your CHA's responsibility to claim this shipment under this agreement. Customs or government will not do it for you. Okay, so if you're not smart, then you pay high custom duty and basically lose money. Right? So use the FTAs. Except for the FTAs, there are other sort of arrangements, such as again, we have something called in India, we have EPCG, which is Export Promotional Capital Goods. All right. In simple terms, forget the terminology. For if you're able to commit to the government that although I'm importing $1 million worth of equipment today, I will also, because of this equipment, manufacture products and export out of the country 10 times, right? So I will import 1 million worth of equipments which will manufacture me 10 million worth of products which I will export, and I'm committing it today to you, right? So that is under that import export commitment by the buyer, Government can give you, let's say, a subsidized rate or reduced rate of that particular access code. It's not always applicable. It's very, very specific. For example, EPCG is only applicable to your equipments, right? So if you're a capital equipment buyer, again, going to the whole concept of know what you are buying. Okay. In this case, if you're buying equipment, you have to know about what EPCG is. Okay. So know the EPCG, and I have seen many organizations paying duty according to the reduced EPCG. Last time, I think the difference is huge. The standard custom duty was roughly about 20%, and under EPCG, it's about 3% with the export commitments, etc. So find out about the EPCG sort of a stuff or similar one. The third way to reduce custom duty is look for the agreements. Again, FTAs is only one part. There are, let's say, other agreements such as LDC, which is called the Least Developed Country Agreement. I'll show you the names. And it's again a free trade sort of an agreement, but it's a bit different. So let's say for here, LDC agreement. Yeah, so LDC trade agreement, correct? Now, not this one. One second. Least developed countries agreement. Yeah, least developed countries trade agreement. All right. So there are some organized countries which are listed as part of this trade agreement, and then there are some products that are attached under this agreement. So depending upon what exactly you're buying, just check whether the countries you're buying from are listed in this trade agreement. And if yes, I think you pay again a very, very nominal amount and not the whole amount of the custom duty. So the point I'm trying to make is you have to be really, really aware as a really good buyer of mapping between the regions of your supplier and what kind of trade agreements your government has in place. Create a simple Excel table, keep track of it. If you don't know, ask your CHA. You should be able to do fine, but don't pay extra custom duties, please. All right. The fourth point was the purpose, right? Now, purpose of your purpose, I'll say purpose only. When I say purpose, come on. When I say purpose, what do I mean? Purpose basically means if your equipment that you're trying to buy is for R&D purposes only, you don't have to pay, in most of the cases, you don't have to pay custom duty. Or even if you have to pay custom duty, you will be able to get the refund out of it, okay, from the government. That's the only one where you actually can get a refund. But again, find out what is the use of the product that you're importing and then declare it accordingly. Remember, government is not going to find the most best optimized way for you to reduce the duty. You will have to declare or claim and apply for exemptions. Okay. One case which I have seen people getting stuck at is custom can agree or disagree with the HS classification. So I've seen cases where custom has put in penalties on many companies of choosing a wrong HS code intentionally just to reduce the custom duty. It has not gone down really well. Uh, Now the custom is getting more and more active. So instead of looking things that has been imported in the past, I think they're questioning the things right at the time of importing also. So what can happen is they can ask you to choose another HS code under which you have to pay higher duty. The option for you would be to pay that duty or don't pay and go to arbitration. But in that case, you lose the time because you're paying penalties, etc. We'll see what kind of penalties, etc. So there's something called duty under protest. So you can pay the duty under protest, which is I don't agree with your decision, but I'm still paying the higher duty. And later you can duty under protest, okay. And later you can probably file it and then go for arbitration, etc., etc. All right, so this is the basic of the custom clearance process. Have I missed anything? Not really, just an idea. Okay, so now this is also done. We go for the freight forwarding. Awesome. Yeah, smooth words, right? All right, so now save it, freight forwarding. So what exactly is freight forwarding, right? What are the terms involved in freight forwarding that you should be aware of, etc., etc. So freight forwarding is nothing but, let's say, a person who arranges the movement of freight, right, from, let's say, Germany to India or India to any other country, the container movement, right? So the way this thing happens is we have shipping lines, right, and we have buyer and we have supplier. Let me put it this way. So supplier want to ship to buyer, which is in country A, B, or C, etc., etc., etc. Right. Now, supplier can approach shipping lines directly. Shipping lines basically means Maersk, uh, Mediterranean, some other Hapag-Lloyd. There's bunch of many shipping lines. Yeah. But shipping lines may or may not entertain supplier because the volume could be very low of the containers that you are trying to ship. Okay, so that means there is a mediator and often what we call as FF, which is freight forwarder. And these are the agencies which act as consolidators, right? So they will be working with not only one buyer supplier, but many buyers and suppliers. Sorry. So many buyers and suppliers, they consolidate their volume and then they approach a shipping line, right? So they have their active relationship, which they are able to utilize and then offer the movement. So generally what happens as part of freight forwarding is a couple of terms you have to be aware. One, you have port of loading, port of discharge, you have discharge. Port of loading, port of discharge, you have Incoterms, which you are aware already, you have insurance, etc., etc. And most importantly, you have containers. Yes, we'll go through one by one. Containers and containers. Yes, and then you have detention free period. I'll tell you what detention free period is all about. Okay, so port of loading is nothing but from where you are shipping, right? What's the port of loading? Port of discharge is the country where you are shipping to. So in this case, it could be Hamburg. In this case, it could be any seaport in India, Nhava Sheva, Chennai, etc. Incoterms is basically whether it's FOB, it's CIF, etc. Whether it's X works, like we saw. Insurance is the premium that you have to pay. You have to issue a certificate. We will cover this during the insurance clauses. Marine insurance, I think it's, yeah. Containers. Okay, so now this is where things get interesting. So once you appoint a freight forwarder, the freight forwarder, what they will do is based upon your packing list that you have to send to the freight forwarder, they will decide how many containers you need, or you can directly tell them how many containers you need. Now, containers are nothing but the boxes in which the shipping packages are stuffed, if I put it this way. They comes in all shapes and sizes. Standard ones are 20-footer containers, 40-footer containers. I think we have 20-footer high cube uh, and 40-footer high cube. I can show you types of containers, also types of shipping containers. Yeah. Boom. Yeah, I think this standard containers, high cube containers, hard top, open top, flat racks. I've used flat racks quite a lot, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So these are the type of containers. Now, specific uses I will not be covering in this session. I can cover maybe some other time, but container. So basically, you tell the freight forwarder you need 120 footer, 220 footer containers, 440 footer containers, whatever it is. After you communicate this to your freight forwarder, he will contact the shipping line, right? And the shipping line would then place the containers at the supplier warehouse for what we call as loading. Okay, what we call as loading. And the supplier then has to load the material into the containers at his factory using forklift, etc. Um, and usually they have to turn this around within 2-3 days. Otherwise, there are some charges. Otherwise, you will miss the vessel, etc., etc. Right? So there's a time-bound activity. So freight forwarder will coordinate for that, whether containers have been given to supplier or not, whether the loading has been completed or not, whether the consignment has left the supplier factory or not, and is now under, let's say, the export custom clearance, if I put it this way. So he will make sure the export custom clearance is also being taken smoothly, although it is responsibility of supplier, but he's providing the paperwork, etc., etc. All right. And then he will publish you something called, after the goods have been loaded on the shipping vessel, he will issue the bill of lading, right? Now, freight forwarders issues the bill of lading. There are different types of bill of lading. I'm not covering into that aspect right now. Bill of lading could be issued by the shipping lines, and bill of lading can be issued by the freight forwarders also. One more minute, please. Okay. So bill of lading can be issued by the shipping line, and bill of lading can also be issued by the freight forwarders. Custom would always need bill of lading issued by shipping line, not by freight forwarder, because it doesn't hold any value. But anyway, all right. So bill of lading will be issued depending upon the type of containers, etc., etc. He will tell you the ocean freight that you will pay, so that information will also come here, ocean freight amount. And that's pretty much it from the freight forwarder's responsibility. There are freight forwarders such as DHL. Uh, I will not say FedEx because they are super expensive. We have DHL. Then yeah, there are others as well. I don't want to name them. Just realize, but depending upon the freight forwarder you're using, they will issue you the ocean freight amount, which you can use it and put it back into the customs while paying the custom duty export. Now, one more important thing while you're negotiating with freight forwarder, apart from the ocean freight, because of course you will negotiate the ocean freight, is the detention free period. What exactly is a detention free period? Detention free period is basically X amount of days. So when you get the shipping containers from the shipping line here, right? After the shipping container reaches the final port of destination at the export country, right? Shipping line would give you X amount of days under which you have to return the containers to them. Meaning you have to clear the consignment from your port, take it to your factory, unload the material, and bring it back to the shipping line's local office in that city, and do it in a time bound manner. If you cross that timeline, then shipping line will charge you per container per day basis. Okay. Now that period where you will not be charged is called detention free period. Most of the shipping line will give you 14 to 21 days detention free period. I'm not sure of the latest benchmark. My benchmarks are probably a couple of years old, 3 to 4 probably, but this is the average range that every shipping line will give you for the detention free period. If you're getting 7, because that's the first quotation they will give you, if you're getting 7-day detention free period, it's usually nuts. You will end up paying a lot of penalties. So don't fall into the trap of having a lower ocean freight rate but mm, zero or absolutely nothing, or 7 days sort of a detention free period, because you will end up paying penalties, and it's quite expensive depending upon the number of containers and number of days you will end up finally, right? So take care of this portion as well. Uh, so detention is charged by the shipping line. I missed one point, but on purpose. There's another penalty that you have to pay is called demurrage. Demurrage. This amount is again is a penalty, but it is paid to the custom department. What do I mean by this demurrage? Is basically when your ship arrives at the custom port, the custom will unload that container and put it onto a space, if I put it this way, in an area, and then you have to claim the right on that container and move it from custom area to, let's say, a dedicated area where shipping line has bought a place. So let me describe. This is the ship that arrives. It moves into a temporary area, temp area, which is of custom. Okay, and then from custom it goes to another area which is owned by a shipping line. Okay, still within the port. Okay, so and this we call this boundaries is, let's say, the port. There's an area which is immediately where ship berths and we unload it, and then you move it into a holding area which is owned by shipping line. So for this temporary areas, I think you get only 2 days or so. If you're not moving from this area to that area, you have to pay demurrage. This could be because of the delay due to CHA, or this could be because of the delay due to even shipping line. So if they are not moving the containers from the temporary area to their designated area, you end up paying charges. Although the delays of shipping line. So unfair, but it happens. So take care of this clause also. Don't pay demurrage, otherwise your penalties stack up. That's pretty much it for the freight forwarding portion. I hope you get the idea of the basics in the freight forwarding world. Okay, so this is also covered. Let me take a pause and check if there are any chat messages. Awesome. All right. Now we move towards basic of contract clauses. I'm thinking, should I cover it here or should I reiterate what we have mentioned here already? Let me think about it. Nah, I think we have covered it. A lot of the content that I originally planned, I basically expanded in the commercial terms also. I'm not able to recall if I need to add something more, but basics of contract clauses. Is there anything else that we have to see? One point I just want to add here is, when the legal team can help you here, but there's something called indemnification, and I'll cover it. Indemnification. What's the other point? The performance guarantees we have covered already. So the risk on the performance side is fixed. Indemnification is here. Um, uh, Patent infringement, I think we'll cover here. You have, let me Google it up. Typical contract losses, just to see if I'm missing anything. Typical contract clauses in government. I'll show you here. Yes, correct. Okay, I want to cover force majeure. So let me add force majeure to this list. Go back. Termination triggers covered. Jurisdiction now. Damages planning implementation. Show me some more. Confidentiality, force majeure, termination, jurisdiction, dispute, damages. That's it. That's it. I think this should be fine. Okay. So the only 2 points I want to cover, because the rest we have covered already, is indemnification and force majeure. What is indemnification is basically sort of a guarantee that your supplier has to give you in case there are some legal lawsuits or claims uh, that are filed against your supplier by someone else. Then that party who's filing a lawsuit, if they decide to file a lawsuit against you as well because you use services of that particular supplier, you shouldn't be paying any penalty. Okay. Let me simplify by giving an example. Let's say the product that you have bought from your supplier was designed by stealing a patent from some other country. Okay. Now you would not know whether the designing that has been done or the R&D that has been done by your supplier is due to a patent infringement or not, right? And let's say you buy that equipment and later that company whose patent was infringed comes to know that this particular supplier has sold you an equipment. That company can choose to file lawsuits not only against that supplier but against you as well, because they might say that it was your responsibility to buy responsibly or find out before buying. Now, in order to avoid that sort of transaction risk, you put an indemnification clause in the contract that basically says, under this sort of an situation, it is your supplier who will indemnify you, who will protect you from every other exposure also. So he takes on the responsibility. So that's where the indemnification clause. So I've given you patent infringement as an example. It can be any they can be any side of situation. So under that, I think you need to protect your clause. Force majeure is basically a clause where when you would put the LD clause here, let's say of late delivery, right? And you want to terminate your contract because of this. So 1 second, I will also pull up the example if I can. Yeah, I think I should describe it. Anyway, so let's say I want to terminate my contract, okay, because the supplier has delayed the order and I was not able to manufacture my product and it got me into revenue loss, blah blah blah, anything. Okay. All right, what am I looking at? I'm looking at this. Where is my training? Give me 1 second. Okay. Yeah. So what will happen in this case is you have all the rights in the world to terminate the contract. Okay. Similarly, supplier can also blame you for saying that my payment was delayed, or let's say you're not picking up containers, etc., etc. Could be anything, right? Except we define certain conditions which are force majeure, which is basically meaning there could be some unforeseen circumstances, natural disaster, flood, war, etc., etc. So although buyer or seller has the intention to fulfill the responsibilities, but they are unable to do so because of this unforeseen circumstances. So under this force majeure clause, no one should be able to cancel the contract. So you define some set of preconditions, although this clause is fairly universal. So if a situation is falling under force majeure, the contract cancellation clause becomes nullified. If the situation is outside of force majeure, then you are able to put LDs, you are able to do a contract termination, etc., etc. So that's what the clause is all about, force majeure. Brilliant. So we have concluded the contract clauses. Now we will go into the basics of import and export process, which would roughly be what we covered under freight forwarding and custom clearance together. Okay, but I'm going to reiterate and summarize One more time. All right. Okay. Second. All right. Okay. Let's go. So basics of import and export process. Export process. Okay. So this is clear. So where do we start with? We start with, let's say, your PO contract, or rather we say, let's say the documentation, right? We start with what kind of documents is needed because import export is fine. Documents needed, as I told you, is your PO copy, your bill of lading, PL, as we say, packing list. You can have, how do I, why did I forgot? Invoice. You have marine insurance certificate, which will cover in next. You have your ocean freight invoice, if if it's needed. Usually it is not needed. Uh, that's that's pretty much it. From the documentation perspective, I'm talking import. I don't have much exposure with the export. So after this, what happens is you have to identify, as I said, HS code. Okay. So whether you're doing import or export, I think this step is common. The seller has to do this, blah blah blah, and they have to identify HS code. And someone comes and pays the custom duty. So what I can do is, because export happens first and then import, so I can do it like this. So custom duty paid by seller. I will, oh, sorry. Okay, so custom duty is paid by seller. Now documentation happens. Import, export. So one thing I can do here is the actual loading. So I will give access code. Move this down here. Here is the packaging. Let's say container loading, right? So this is where your containers are loaded. 20 footer, 40 footer, etc., etc., etc. Once some containers are loaded, it is generally taken from supplier's factory to the export custom clearance process, which is happening here. So custom will weigh the containers to verify whatever you have listed down on your packing list, the weight, gross weight, and net weight matches with the actual weighing. And then the export duty, if there is any, export custom duty, if there is any, is paid by seller. After this is true, then the loading on the vessel happens. Okay, this loading is done by the shipping line, and once this is true, the output is bill of lading. Okay, sorry, this BL and will not be here. Okay, we usually start with this. Alright, so bill of lading will happen. So this bill of lading is then given to your freight forwarder. Freight forwarder gives this to your buyer, and when you receive everything, you have PO copy, BL, packing list, invoice. So these documents becomes available to you. You have re-identification of HS codes. Then the next step after this is, as I said, filing the shipment according to trade agreement. Otherwise, you will end up paying more duty. So here, then, depending upon your Incoterm, whether it is FOB, CIF or DDP, someone pays the custom duty. In this case, I will assume FOB term because we have used freight forwarder. So we will say custom duty was custom duty was custom duty paid by buyer. Now I forgot one thing. There's some process change. So when the shipment arrives, you claim here. This step was right. Remove this. So when the shipment arrives, you file. The container unloading happens into the temporary area. I'll show you what do I mean by temporary area here. So when a ship arrives, you move into the temp area and goes to the shipping line designated area. So this movement happens. After this happens is after this thing is done, you file to according to the trade agreement. There is usually an inspection, and then custom duty is paid by buyer, and then it's out of the custom premise, so the consignment reaches the buyer factory. Unloading happens at the buyer factory, and then the shipping container is returned, hopefully within detention free period. Hopefully, yeah, that's a big word. One should study the amount of money shipping lines make because of this detention. It's bonkers, huge. All right. Now, why I mentioned this step is once your consignment is out, okay? Once your consignment is out, how custom will declare on paper that everything is okay. All right. Now, when you pay the custom duty and custom releases the consignment, and it's important step, right? Very transactional, but extremely important. When custom releases the consignment, it's basically go and unload it. They release something called bill of entry. This bill of entry is usually when you file the shipment, when you are inputting everything on the system, this form which is generated is called bill of entry. Okay, and when it is released, the bill of entry is updated that the duty is paid, everything is okay. Now this bill of entry is an extremely critical document. You know why? Because when you will ask your supplier or your bank to make the payment, so let's say you're paying against shipping documents, right? So the shipping document has reached you. Let's say now you decide, okay, shipping document you should pay it before that. But okay, let me change the example. You are paying against delivery, all right? Now, when you will go to your bank and they'll say these are my documents, etc., etc., the bank will say fine, but I need bill of entry payment also. Some cases they will ask upfront, some cases they will give you certain time, but what will they do is the rule is if you are remitting foreign currency, in this case dollar, from India or any country for that matter, they will have to prove that the bank has to prove to the central bank that this was a legit transaction. And the only way to prove that is, let's say they remitted $1 million to the supplier as part of the trade. They would ask you these documents, but these documents have no validation from government perspective. These are issued by private entities, right? So how central bank, which is the custodian of the whole foreign currencies, they will ask the local bank making the payment, right? Which is private bank, etc., etc., etc. Local bank. They will ask the central bank will ask local bank to submit a proof the transaction was valid. The proof is this bill of entry which was issued by the custom. Okay. So the local bank will contact the buyer to submit the bill of entries, submit the bill of entry document. Under 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, this time period keeps on changing, but it is always there. So the buyer has to submit this relevant bill of entry to local bank, and local bank has to submit to central bank, and this whole activity is time bound. It was years before, at least 1 year or so. I'm not sure what the latest time period is, but in case local bank fails to submit the copy to the central bank, it is considered as a violation under I forgot the term. I'm unable to recall, but it's violation under the Foreign Currency FEMA Act. I think so. FEMA, Foreign Exchange Management Act. Let me show you. I think so. It's under FEMA Act. Go and read it and correct me if I'm wrong. So in India, this is Foreign Exchange Management Act. So if the buyer, if the local bank doesn't submit the bill of entry in the shipment that was imported, and buyer fails to inform the local bank also, then both local bank and buyer are held in contempt under the FEMA Act guideline. So it's a serious, serious violation. Why am I highlighting till this granularity? Because I have seen many cases where the buyers are getting penalties and being charged under the FEMA Act, and it's not pretty, not pretty at all. Okay, let's proceed forward. So this whole step is the basics of import and export process from start to the finish. Okay, done. Okay, now we will move to basics of insurance. This should be pretty quick. Basics of marine insurance. All right, what I'm gonna do is there are some outstanding messages on my LinkedIn. Give me 1 minute and I will start the session shortly. 1 second. In the meantime, you can drop questions in the chat and I will try to answer it. Okay, let's start. Fine. Okay, so let's start with the basics of marine insurance. Okay, so what exactly is marine insurance all about? And I'm going to limit myself to the extent of importing the shipment only because this is a very big area. Okay, basically under marine insurance, you are buying for a coverage, right? Let me start with insurance first, and then we can dive into the marine insurance, etc., etc. So, what kind of insurance are applicable in procurement environment? All right. Now, as I told you, every transaction needs to be insured from end to end. Most likely, the buyers use either FOB or CIF. So, I'm gonna take that as an example. Okay, so hold on. Aditya says the audio is not audible. It's now audible. Guys, give me a shout if I'm still not audible. I will try to increase my volume here. All right, so the basics of insurance. We have import insurance, what we call as marine insurance, right? It's basically from your supplier premise to your premise till your port, if I put it this way. Marine insurance is from basically, I'm counting FOB, is from your in transit, ocean freight in transit movement. Okay, so from port of loading till port of discharge. Yeah, that's a better word. Let's put it this way. Coverage is from port of loading to port of discharge. Awesome. The second thing is the domestic insurance. What this domestic insurance is, it's for the inland movement. Now this inland movement can be both, but since we are focusing on FOB and CIF, is from your port of discharge to your factory warehouse. Okay, this is the second domestic insurance. And the third type of insurance is the warehouse insurance, where you're covering all the concerns which are there. So all the clauses, fire insurance, safety, etc., 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 are covered under this warehouse insurance portion. So these are the three basic type of domestic or other commercial insurance, at least I have dealt with. Let's start with the first one, which is the basic marine insurance thing. What is it, how it functions on a very high level basis. So this thing is, whenever you have an FOB shipment, so what you will do is you will contact the marine insurance companies. If I can recall a name, Federal Insurance, something, forgot it, but there are many insurance companies who offer marine insurance. The way this whole thing functions is you declare your invoice value, or what we call a C&F value, which is your cost and freight. Okay, let's start with marine insurance. You declare the cost and freight value. What these guys will do is they will inflate this to 110%. So what they will do is 110% of C&F value. Why 110% is basically to cover any sort of contingencies. It could be more, but I've only seen 110. Could have changed in previous 2-3 years, but my experience is 110 only. Basis this becomes the insured value. So 110 is the insured value, right? And remember, customs needs CIF, right? So the custom needs CIF value, which is cost, insurance, and freight. You have C&F. This I is basically the insurance premium paid, not the insured value. So the insurance premium is basically calculated on this insured value, and it's generally, if I recall my own terms, it's 0.025%, or in some cases it was 0.5%, depending upon the risk of the country you are shipping from. Okay, of the insured value. That's it. Okay, so this way your insurance premium for $1 million shipment would work out to be basically couple of, so let's say if my C&F value is 1 million, right, then I'm doing 110, and then I'm using 0.025%. So my premium would be $275. That's it. Now there are some clauses in every marine insurance. Is basically you have a minimum insured amount, and then it according to this calculation. So it could be minimum USD 300 or this one, whichever is higher. Okay, so by minimum in this case, instead of 275 you will pay US 300 instead of 275 because of this clause, right? So when you are negotiating an insurance policy, always talk about this particular stuff. So what happens whenever, so this is how you declare CIF value. Okay, now similarly domestic, you will also have the same stuff. Generally what happens is, when you are trying to buy a marine insurance policy, you don't negotiate policy by policy, because to fix this premium, right, you first have to commit. So what do we normally do is we will analyze what is my total import value, what we call as FOB value, right? And this FOB value will determine how much coverage you need. It's very similar to when you try to buy your personal insurance, how much coverage you need, right? So for example, I need coverage for 300 million. Okay, so in technical terms, what we are buying is a blanket policy. When we say blanket policy, is the insurance company will say, I don't care what you import, just tell me the list of countries you will be importing from. Second, tell me the amount. Okay, so I will give the list of the countries that I'm importing from, and then I will tell I need 300 million worth of insurance. Fine. So what they will issue is called blanket policy. Okay, so and so company, which is my company, will import up to $300 million, and this is the premium that we will be able to give you, etc., etc. Fine, done deal. That's how a blanket insurance policy gets logged in. So every time there is a shipment, they will issue you a username, ID, password, whatever. You will go onto their portal, you will fill a form, which would be a shipment specific form, bill of lading number, product name, invoice value, etc., freight, and then they will calculate the premium for you. You take a print or a PDF digital copy and hand it over to your CHA so that he can update in customs database the proper CIF value. That's how a CIF is calculated. Starts with CNF. Okay, so this is the marine insurance. Domestic also, it's more lighter. Instead of giving the countries blah blah blah, because it's domestic, we also say just give me a blanket policy of 300 million or 200 million, whatever the amount is, and then again they will also issue me a blanket policy. The difference between marine insurance and domestic insurance could be that you are not required to issue the certificate for each and every domestic movement, because the number of trucks are moving are so many. So you are kind of like insured. You only have to do monthly or quarterly reportings of the trucks that have moved, and that's usually fine. Whereas in marine insurance, you have to deal with certificate by certificate, because custom usually requires that information. Again, things should be changing, but that's what I have worked through, so that's some explaining. Now, this is the part I would also like to touch. What happens if you have to file a claim, right? So there could be some damages to the equipment, etc., etc. The ways of working in terms of how to file a claim, how to file insurance claim. I think this process is very similar to how you would file a claim when there's a car accident, etc. So you will phone up your insurance agent. The insurance agent will arrange for a surveyor. So these are qualified people who would then go and survey the incident by photographs, each and everything. Important point is it can take up to a day, and that's what you should also negotiate with your insurance company, is how fast the surveyors can be made available in case there's a claim, and then they will give you a report. After that, your consignment is cleared. You can move it, you can use it, you can do whatever you want to, and basis that report, the refund process will start, and it can take months. So it's usually quite painful to get an insurance claim, even in the commercial environment also, because you're talking millions of dollars, not a smaller amount. So this is how it happens. So again, the reason I'm telling you this, whenever there's an insurance claim, for example, you receive a consignment in a sealed container, right? When you open the container, you see the stuff is broken or missing. The first thing your team should do is take photographs, videos. That's even better. Don't touch it. Call the insurance agent wait for the surveyor to come in, and then let them conduct the activity, document as much as possible, because that's the only point and that's the only way you will be able to get the refund money. Otherwise, you can count on many bad experiences that I had, where the lack of proper documentation resulted in uh, partial insurance remittances, not full. So that's the basics of the insurance. I would not go and bore you with freight insurance, liability insurance, hull insurance, etc., etc., etc. But let's limit ourselves to marine cargo insurance only. Okay, so this topic is also covered. We are, I think, more than halfway through. Now let's talk about basics of LD calculation. I will save this file. What do we mean by LD? Right? We discussed this before. LD basically means liquidated damages clause. And I'm looking for a section where I explained you this concept. I think it was here. Yeah. Okay. We covered this under basics of commercial terms. So what LD is, how is it calculated, etc., etc., etc. And I will share the clauses that I designed as part of the LD clause. Now, LD basically stands for liquidated damages, which is basically nothing but a fancy term of saying if you don't meet A, B, C, D, E, I will charge you penalty and then you will have to pay me back. Okay, that's what liquidated damages is all about. The clauses that I drafted were around late delivery. So in case the delivery was delayed up to a certain extent. So the clauses I drafted was if your delivery was delayed, let's say by more than 25 days, or to be fair, let's say if the delivery is delayed by a month, right? Then I will charge you 0.05% or 0.5% of the contract value every 2 weeks of delay, capped to the maximum amount of 5% of contract value. Okay, this is how usually I structured my LD clauses. So basically what I'm saying is, for every 2 weeks of delay, I will charge you a penalty of 0.5%. So that means if my contract value is 1 million and your contract is delayed, I will charge you not 0.5, the 0.5%, yeah. So I'll charge you $5,000 every 2 weeks of delay, okay, and this will continue till you don't deliver the consignment. Let's say you don't deliver at all, the maximum penalty I will be imposing on you will be capped at $50,000. So it's basically between 5,000 and 50,000. Otherwise, this clause becomes very immature if you don't decide on the ceiling price also. So that's how I worked. Be it be for the late delivery, be it be for your poor performance, so on and so forth. I've seen some organization who have attached revenue losses also. So for example, if due to your delay in delivery, I suffered loss of production and hence my sale was lost, so then you have to pay me that revenue loss also. Uh, yes, I've read these clauses, but I haven't seen any supplier accepting it. I'm standing to be corrected, but usually people would not accept revenue losses or potential revenue losses. But I think it's between you and your supplier for negotiation. Test your waters. If you can, it will be a wonderful addition, but I haven't seen this in action, honestly. So this was about the LD calculation. Now we will have basics of pricing formula mechanism. This is really simple, straightforward. I will explain you from example perspective. So let's say we are covering this one, basics of pricing formula. Okay, so what do we mean by this? If your contract is not a fixed contract, take example of palm oil, okay, or steel, whatever. Okay, if you say I will buy X amount from you for next 6 months, so my contract could be give me 1,000 units of, let's say, steel bars. Okay, give me 1,000 units of steel bars every month. That's your contract. And you will say validity of contract is 6 months, so 1,000 units per month for next 6 months. Yeah, so 1,000 units in Jan, 1,000 units in Feb, 1,000 units in March, April, May, June, whatever. Okay, now it's very hard to, and if your supplier is saying I'm not ready to give you a fixed price because hey, come on, the volatility in market is too high, so either give me premium. For example, if the current steel price, let's assume, is USD 100 per unit, and I'm keeping it simple, right? The seller may say you're asking me to give you a supply for next 6 months over a period of time. Either take everything today or I will charge you 200 because I don't know whether price will go up, how much, there's too much risk, right? So either this or that. The way to solve this sort of a problem is agree upon a formula driven pricing. Formula driven pricing. So you're telling your supplier, let's be fair, let's agree upon a formula, which would be, I would say, the prices. So the risk is coming from the price of steel being too volatile. So you can say, okay, I will give you price of steel plus 10%, which is your profit margin. Now for this price of steel, you can fix a reference which both of you and your supplier will refer to. This could be LME, London Metal Stock Exchange, or whatever. Okay, so each and every month you will reconcile what's the average price of steel according to the LME. You will add 10%, and that becomes your price for the next month. And you do this exercise every single month for 6 months, and that is what we call as basic pricing formula mechanism. So for example, we are sitting in Jan, I will take average of, so on 1st of Feb, okay, on 1st of Feb, I will take average of steel prices in Jan. Okay, so let's say the average of steel prices in Jan was 100. Okay, and then I have already agreed. So what I'm fixing is the premium percentage, which is 10%. So 10% of 100 is 10. So your selling price becomes for Feb 110. Okay, and you do this exercise in March also. What's the average steel prices in March or for in Feb? Maybe it was 120 from LME. Add 10%, that becomes your selling price for March. And this is how most of the non-fixed price contracts work. There are many commodities which are bought according to the formula driven pricing, not the fixed contract. So keep this in mind also. Excellent. Okay, brilliant. So you have covered this. Technical evaluation, I think I've covered already. If you remember, I told you about RFPs, RFQs, and then this is where I explain what the technical evaluation is. So I will skip it. You can go back to the timestamps and watch this section again on technical evaluation. Commercial evaluation, I will only focus on this part which says how to calculate landed cost. I think this is important. If you want to know what commercial evaluation is, again, go to the section where I already spoke about RFPs. I've explained what commercial evaluation is. So now I'm only going to cover how to calculate the landed cost. What exactly is a landed cost? How to make sure the apple to apple, like everyone says, how to ensure the comparison is being done on apple to apple basis. Let's go. Let's go. Okay. So how to calculate landed costs? It's actually really simple. You are ensuring that you have captured everything. So there is a basic price, which is your unit price times the volume. Basic price. You need to ensure you're adding packaging costs. So I'm going to list down the cost components which you need to ensure. That's the basic thing. So let's say basic price is $10,000. Packaging is usually at 2%. Again, if you don't have packaging cost fixed, or if you don't have included, just negotiate it accordingly. So that becomes, then after this you have freight. A good estimate of freight was used to be in the range of 3%. I would have to recalculate it, but again this comes as a total of packaging and basic price, and then you are marking 3% as the freight price. I've seen people using 2% also, but given the recent circumstances, I really don't know what's the latest reference. Then you have taxes. I'm sorry, I forgot taxes. So taxes could be your VAT plus your, taxes could be VAT and custom duty. Okay, then you have to, I think this is it. I don't want to go, this could be a 5%. Just find out what's the VAT percent, and custom duty, just find out what the custom duty percentage is. That's usually, in some countries you will either have VAT or custom duties. In some countries you will have both, right? So I'm not sure of the individual country's tax structure, so I'm keeping both. In India, I guess we only pay custom duty. On imports we don't pay VAT, but it's different in some continents, especially in Africa. I guess you pay both. That's okay. So the custom duty is always paid on the total value. Sorry, I forgot one more thing. Insurance, that we just saw. Insurance could be 0.05%. Then you have custom duty, then you have VAT, blah blah blah. Let's not waste time in calculations. So this is how you will arrive at a total landed cost. Okay, done. Just calculate the percentages. Remember, custom duty is always calculated on basic plus packaging plus freight plus insurance. Always. Okay, it's on the total value, and then I think it's 20%. Awesome. And let's imagine a scenario that VAT is also applicable on everything. Now you might be wondering, why am I not making it 25% straight, right? And that would be a good question. The reason there are custom duty and VAT elements are separately charged, and we'll cover it sometime in future session, is VAT is a refundable tax. So although you have to pay now, it's possible to recover this VAT by your tax team. I'm not going to go into the details of netting off, meaning you're paying VAT upfront and you're taking it from your customer also. So there is a VAT intake and VAT liability. You can net off both, but again, don't be confused by that. But we capture VAT separately because it's technically possible to claim back this 525. That's why these components are separate. And let's calculate insurance also. Insurance was these three components put together, and then 0.5%. 0.5%. Okay. Done. Awesome. That's it. And then you can do a total of this. I think some, not home. Brilliant. So this is your landed cost. That's how you calculate the landed cost. Have I missed anything in this? No, packaging, insurance, freight, custom duty. Yeah, you can charge the local freight, local trucking after custom duty till your factory. But again, it would be minimal given these count. But if you want to be really, really thorough, just add it. That's fine. The reason I excluded it because that component is going to be the same for supplier A, supplier B, supplier C, supplier D, unless they are not arriving at different ports. But for the sake of simplicity, I think these are the major components of calculating your landed costs. Awesome. So this covers this section. Okay. Done. I'm going to take a pause here for the next 5 minutes or so, and I'm thinking whether we should end the session now and come back tomorrow because I would really like to go in depth for the basics of negotiation. So let's see what we have covered. We have covered quite a lot. Awesome. We have covered this much. Okay. Yep, I think I'll take a pause for today. Let me come back tomorrow on this one, and then we will go for another session where we'll try to run through with the remaining one. I really, really want to go in depth for the basics of negotiation. Okay, so that would be all for today. We were not able to complete the curriculum that I drafted. It's quite extensive, but I'm really happy that we were able to do today approximately 3.5 hour sort of a procurement marathon. I will try to do it as frequent as I can. Again, connect with me on the LinkedIn or YouTube. Drop me a text if there is a topic that you want me to cover, and I will cover it in my next session. Thank you so much for joining in, and again, leave your questions in the comments or on my LinkedIn, and then we will try to pick it up again. Thank you so much for joining in. Bye.